I never thought trying on an old mini skirt would change everything. But then my nephew saw me. His eyes lingered too long, and the tension in the room shifted. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination. But later that night, his message shattered that illusion. I can't stop thinking about you. My heart raced. I knew this wasn't right, but I couldn't stop what was coming next. I've always been the responsible one in my family. My name is Rachel, and at 35, I thought I had life figured out. A stable job, a quiet home, and family relationships I could always count on. My nephew, Ethan, had always been a part of that picture. At 22, he was like a little brother I never had, smart, funny, and confident in ways I admired. I helped raise him in many ways. After his parents divorced, he spent summers at my house. I taught him how to cook, helped him with homework, and gave him advice about girls. He always looked up to me, or so I thought. Lately, though, something felt different. Ethan wasn't the shy teenager I remembered. He'd grown up, broad shoulders, sharp features, and a confidence that made it hard to ignore. I tried to brush it off as harmless admiration, the way any younger man might look at an older woman. But something about the way he looked at me lingered longer than it should have. It started out innocent enough. He'd stop by to fix things around the house, or keep me company on quiet weekends. We'd talk for hours, and I enjoyed his company more than I wanted to admit. Then came that Saturday afternoon. I was cleaning out my closet, sorting through old clothes, when I found it, an old mini skirt from my younger days. It was too short, too tight, but for some reason I slipped it on. I laughed at my reflection, brushing it off as a silly moment of nostalgia. And then Ethan knocked on the door. When I opened it, his eyes darted to my legs before snapping back up to meet mine. His gaze lingered for just a second too long, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. I told myself I was imagining things, that it was nothing. But as the day unfolded, the tension between us grew thicker, and I started questioning everything. Had I crossed a line without realizing it? Or was he the one pushing boundaries I didn't know how to handle? I didn't have the answers then. But what happened next made sure I'd never forget that day. The air in the house felt heavier after that day. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that Ethan hadn't meant anything by the way he looked at me. But the memory of his lingering gaze wouldn't go away. The next morning, I woke up to a text from him. "You looked different yesterday." I can't stop thinking about it. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. Was this just an awkward compliment, or was there something more behind his words? I typed and deleted half a dozen replies before settling on something neutral. "Don't be silly. It was just an old outfit." But his next message made it clear that wasn't how he saw it. "No, Rachel. It wasn't just the outfit. It was you." I should have shut it down then and there. I should have reminded him that I was his aunt, and that this conversation was crossing a line. But instead I froze. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the tension. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. When Ethan showed up at my door later that evening, I told myself it was innocent, just him coming by to finish fixing the sink. But as I let him inside, I felt my heart race in a way that had nothing to do with plumbing. We made small talk as he worked, but his eyes kept drifting toward me. At one point, his hand brushed mine, and the touch lingered longer than it should have. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling back quickly. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," I interrupted, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's just finish this." But I couldn't ignore the way my body reacted to his touch, or the way he kept looking at me like he saw something more than family. Later that night, the texts started again. I can't stop thinking about earlier. "Tell me I'm crazy." I didn't respond. But instead of stopping, he kept pushing. "I know it's wrong, but I can't help how I feel." Panic set in. I wanted to shut it down, to block his number and put an end to whatever this was. But instead, I hesitated. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way he made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. Or maybe it was fear of what would happen if I admitted I felt something too. Because as much as I hated myself for it, part of me didn't want him to stop. The next day, he showed up unannounced again. This time, he didn't even have an excuse. "I just wanted to see you," he said, his voice low. I tried to act normal, to brush it off like nothing was wrong. But when he stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body, I knew things had already gone too far. "Ethan, you need to leave," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't argue. Instead, he looked at me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. "Tell me you don't feel it too," he said. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. And in that silence, everything changed. I told myself it had to stop. I rehearsed the words in my head, firm, clear, final. But when Ethan showed up again the next evening, all those rehearsed words vanished the moment I saw him standing at my door. He wasn't the boy I used to babysit. He was a man now, confident, intense, and impossible to ignore. "I just need to talk," he said, his voice low and deliberate. I should have closed the door. Instead, I stepped aside and let him in. We sat on the couch, the tension in the room so thick I could barely breathe. He looked at me with eyes that searched for answers, for permission, eyes that made me feel vulnerable in ways I wasn't prepared for. "Rachel," he started, his voice shaking slightly. "I can't get you out of my head." "Ethan, stop." I cut in, trying to keep my tone steady. "This is wrong. You know that. Then why does it feel so right?" he asked, his words hitting me like a punch to the gut. I stood up, putting distance between us, but he followed. "Tell me you don't feel it," he said, stepping closer. "Tell me you haven't thought about it too." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was crazy. But instead I froze. Because the truth, the one I didn't want to admit, was that I had thought about it. Too much. His hand brushed my arm, and I felt the warmth of his touch spreading through me. "We can't," I whispered, my voice breaking. "But what if we already have?" Before I could respond, he leaned in, his lips hovering inches from mine. I should have pushed him away. But instead, I let it happen. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if we were both testing the boundaries we knew we were about to shatter. But then it deepened, and suddenly there was no turning back. My heart raced as his hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer. Every logical thought vanished, replaced by a rush of heat and desperation. When we finally pulled apart, reality hit me like a tidal wave. "This is a mistake," I said, stepping back and running my hands through my hair. "Then let's make another one," he said, his voice raw and hungry. I shook my head, but my body betrayed me as he reached for me again. We ended up in the bedroom, and by the time it was over, I felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. I lay there afterward, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. What had I done? I expected him to leave, but he didn't. Instead, he pulled me close, holding me like he never wanted to let go. "I've wanted this for so long," he whispered. His words should have made me feel cherished, but instead they filled me with guilt. When he finally left, the room felt emptier than it ever had before. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that I'd end it before it went any further. But the next day, he texted me. "I can't stop thinking about last night. I need to see you again." And instead of shutting it down, I said yes. The affair spiraled quickly after that. Every time I told myself it was the last time, he'd pull me back in with a look, a touch, a word. I started lying to everyone, my family, my friends, even myself. I avoided family gatherings, terrified someone would notice the way we looked at each other. I turned off my phone when I was with him, ignoring the calls and texts from people who were starting to wonder why I'd been so distant. The secrecy only added to the thrill, but it also deepened the shame. Every time I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. I told myself I was in control, that I could stop whenever I wanted. But the truth was, I was already too far gone. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The affair spun further out of control, leaving me tangled in a web of secrecy and guilt. Ethan and I couldn't seem to stop ourselves. Every stolen moment felt more dangerous, more exhilarating, and more impossible to hide. I started making excuses for why I couldn't attend family gatherings. My sister, Ethan's mother, began to ask questions, her voice tinged with suspicion. "You've been distant lately," she said during one phone call. "Is something wrong?" I assured her everything was fine, but the pit in my stomach grew deeper. I knew I was lying, not just to her but to myself. The tipping point came on a Saturday afternoon. Ethan showed up at my house unannounced again. I panicked as soon as I saw him standing at the door, his eyes dark and intense. "Ethan, you can't keep coming here like this," I hissed, stepping outside to keep him from entering. "I had to see you," he said, his voice low. "I need you, Rachel." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to push him away, to end it right there. But then he grabbed my hand, pulling me close, and I felt that familiar heat, the one that made me forget everything except how he made me feel. I let him in. We didn't even make it to the bedroom this time. The moment the door shut, he pressed me against the wall, and I gave in again. But then it happened. The doorbell rang. We froze, both of us breathing heavily. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice shaky. "It's me." My sister's voice came from the other side. Panic surged through me. I shoved Ethan toward the back door, whispering for him to leave. He hesitated but finally slipped out just as I opened the front door. My sister's eyes swept over me, and I knew immediately that she sensed something was wrong. "Why are you out of breath?" she asked, stepping inside. "I was cleaning," I lied, forcing a laugh. "The vacuum gave me a workout." But she wasn't convinced. Her eyes landed on the 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, and her face hardened. "Who was here?" "No one," I stammered. "I was just—" Before I could finish, my phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. My sister grabbed the phone before I could stop her. "Ethan!" Her voice was sharp as she read the message aloud. "I can't stop thinking about you. I need to see you again." The room spun as the color drained from her face. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is," she demanded, her voice trembling. I opened my mouth to explain, but no words came out. "Oh my God!" Her voice broke. "You and Ethan?" Tears filled her eyes, and the look of betrayal on her face was unbearable. "How could you do this? He's your nephew." "I didn't mean for it to happen," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I never wanted this." "But you let it happen," she shot back. "You let it happen over and over again." I reached for her, but she stepped back. "Stay away from me," she said, her voice cold. "Stay away from him." And then she left. I collapsed onto the couch, sobbing as the weight of everything came crashing down. I didn't hear from Ethan for days after that. The silence was unbearable, but a part of me knew it was for the best. Then, just when I thought it was over, the final blow came. My sister called, her voice icy. "You need to know something," she said. "Ethan's moving away. He doesn't want to see you again." I felt my heart shatter, but I knew it was the right thing. Still, the guilt and shame didn't go away. Everywhere I went, I felt people's stares, heard their whispers. I lost my sister's trust, Ethan's love, and my own sense of self-respect. And yet, even in the wreckage, a part of me missed him, missed the way he made me feel alive. But now, I was left to face the consequences alone. The days that followed felt like a waking nightmare. The silence was suffocating. Ethan was gone, my sister refused to speak to me, and my family, once my anchor, was now a source of shame and judgment. I tried to go about my life as if nothing had changed, but it had. The weight of what I had done hung over me like a storm cloud, and I couldn't escape it. I avoided family events altogether. The thought of facing my sister, or anyone who might have heard the whispers, was too much to bear. I couldn't stomach the idea of seeing their faces twisted in disappointment, pity, or worse, disgust. But the loneliness was unbearable. I found myself staring at my phone, hoping for a message from Ethan, even though I knew it wouldn't come. He had cut all ties, and in some ways that hurt more than the judgment I faced. I missed him. I hated myself for it, but I did. I missed the way he looked at me, the way he made me feel wanted, desired. And that longing made the guilt even heavier. I started drinking more than usual, pouring glasses of wine to numb the ache in my chest. But no amount of alcohol could erase the memories, the stolen moments, the kisses, the nights spent tangled in sheets and secrets. The worst part was facing my sister's betrayal. She didn't just cut me off, she made sure the rest of the family knew what had happened. Soon, even the cousins and aunts I barely spoke to were calling me names behind my back. Disgusting. Unforgivable. How could she? I was branded, not just as a cheater but as something worse. I thought about leaving town, starting fresh somewhere new. But no matter where I went, I knew the shame would follow me. I started therapy, hoping it would help me make sense of everything. My therapist told me the affair wasn't just about Ethan, it was about me. About feeling unseen, unloved, and desperate for attention. She wasn't wrong. Mark, my ex-boyfriend, had left me feeling invisible, and Ethan made me feel alive again. But at what cost? I lost myself in the fantasy, ignoring the damage it caused until it was too late. I wrote Ethan a letter I never sent. "I'm sorry. I hope you find happiness, and that you don't hate me for what happened." It felt like closure, but it wasn't. I saw my sister once after the fallout. She showed up at my door unannounced, her eyes red and tired. "I just want to understand," she said. "Why?" I didn't have an answer. I was lonely, I finally admitted. And weak. She didn't forgive me, not then. Maybe not ever. But at least she left without screaming. Months passed and the rumors died down, but the damage remained. Ethan moved away, and I never saw him again. I kept going to therapy, focusing on rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. Every date felt meaningless, every new connection superficial. I didn't trust myself anymore. How could I, after what I'd done? The truth is, I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive myself. Some mistakes leave scars that don't fade, no matter how much time passes. But I've learned to live with the scars. And if my story serves any purpose, I hope it's this: desire can be dangerous. It can blind you, consume you, and leave you broken. But it doesn't have to define you. You can move forward, even if it takes everything you have to do it. Months turned into a year, but the echoes of what happened still lingered. The pain didn't vanish overnight. Instead, it settled into a dull ache, a reminder of the choices I made and the lives I hurt. I had to face the hardest truth of all. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't innocent. I made a choice, a series of choices, and those choices had consequences. Therapy forced me to look inward, to confront the loneliness and insecurities that led me down that path. It was uncomfortable, even painful, but it also helped me grow. I learned that what I wanted wasn't Ethan. It wasn't passion or excitement. What I really wanted was to feel seen, valued, and loved. And instead of finding that within myself, I sought it in someone else, in the wrong person, in the wrong way. But self-awareness didn't erase the guilt. My relationship with my sister was never the same. She said she forgave me, but her eyes told a different story. The closeness we once shared was gone, replaced by polite conversations and hollow smiles. And Ethan? He disappeared from my life entirely. I still wonder about him sometimes. If he ever truly moved on, if he found someone else, someone more appropriate to love. I hope he did. I hope he found happiness, even if it wasn't with me. But more than that, I hope he healed. Because I know now that what we had wasn't real. It wasn't love. It was an escape from emptiness, from insecurity, from the fear of being unwanted. I don't excuse what I did, but I've stopped punishing myself for it. We're all human. We make mistakes, some bigger than others. And while those mistakes can't be erased, they can teach us something. I learned the importance of boundaries. I learned to face my emotions instead of running from them. And most importantly, I learned to forgive myself, not because I deserve it, but because holding on to guilt only keeps you trapped in the past. I also learned to rebuild. I poured myself into work, into friendships that mattered, and into hobbies that made me feel alive again, on my own terms. It wasn't easy, but little by little, I found myself again. Not the same person I was before, but someone stronger. If there's one thing I want people to take from my story, it's this. Temptation can come from the most unexpected places. It doesn't always start with bad intentions, but it can spiral out of control before you even realize it. And when it does, the damage can be devastating. But no matter how far you fall, you can rise again. It takes time, effort, and forgiveness, mostly of yourself. You'll still have scars. I know I do. But scars don't have to define you. They can remind you of how far you've come. So if you're struggling, if you've made a mistake you think you can't come back from, know this. You can. It won't be easy, but it's possible. You're stronger than you think. And you deserve to heal. What would you have done in my situation? Could you walk away from forbidden feelings? Or would you risk everything for one moment of passion? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your stories. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional and thought-provoking stories. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more stories with you soon. Let me know if you need any changes or further edits.